Good day, everyone. This is Jerome Vincent E. Ejercito, a MAED Communication Arts English student. And I'm here to present my report on theories and practices of writing entitled Socio-Cognitive Approach in Teaching Writing. Writing is one of the macro skills that is challenging to teach given its technicalities. In fact, it is the most complex and most difficult to master. It is the craft of putting words on paper or on the cyberspace as basic means of conveying information. Failure to construct meaning might cause misunderstanding among the writer and the reader, so it is a must for students to master their writing skills. Given the challenge in teaching writing, a lot of theories and approaches were introduced by linguists, researchers, teachers, and professionals, one of which is Socio-Cognitive Approach. These theories and approaches are of great help for language teachers to strategize in teaching writing based on the needs of their learners. At the end of the discussion, you'll be able to define socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing. Identify different models and intervention program under socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing. And share experiences in teaching writing incorporating or integrating the socio-cognitive approach. Here is the content of my report. I'm going to share 3 different models or intervention programs from different researchers and teachers in writing. We have the integration of cognitive and social models of writing by Flower and Hayes, 1981. Socio-Cognitive Writing Intervention Program by Harris and Graham, 1992. And Model of Instructional Scaffolding for the Socio-Cognitive Approach to Writing by Walke. Now, let's define socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing. According to Chandrasegaran 2013, the term socio-cognitive is a concept which brings together elements of cognitive process models of writing and social cultural views including genre-based approaches to writing instruction. We can see in her definition the combination of the cognitive model of writing and social view of writing. When we say cognitive model of writing, it sees writing as a problem-solving, goal-setting, and decision-making activities that play out in the mind of the writer as he or she plans, translates thought to print, and revises. It involves the thinking skills of the learners or the thinking process on what to write, how to write, and why they are writing. On the other hand, social view of writing sees writing as social interaction. Learning to write is therefore a process of socialization into the cultural norms and practices of the writing community. In here, learners are asked questions like, to whom are they writing? And does the writing reflect practices and culture of the community? And does the writing showcase or share what is happening in a particular place or community? That's how Chandrasegaran defined socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing. She is a researcher who conducted a study to determine the effectiveness of the socio-cognitive approach of teaching expository writing for 9th grade students in Singapore, because the conventional method of teaching expository writing in Singapore tends to be limited to suggesting topic content and providing a list of words relevant to the topic. According to her, students are unable to use the content and vocabulary appropriately in their essay. They can suggest content and vocabulary but they find it hard to use them. After using a model of socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing, she found that students displayed more stance assertion moves or being able to write on their own and stance support moves being able to write with supporting facts and evidence. In post-instruction essays, yes, they were able to write sound expository essays. Another under socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing, Flower and Hayes explained that at the beginning of composing, Writers start with defining the rhetorical situation or problem in writing a particular piece of text. With a problem, the writer creates a hierarchical network of guiding goals that help to direct the development of the text. The rhetorical situation guides writers to have a sound and effective writing. The term rhetorical situation refers to the circumstances that bring texts into existence. The concept emphasizes that writing is a social activity produced by people in particular situations for particular goals. As a writer, it will help you carefully think about the situations in which you find yourself writing, to produce more meaningful texts that are appropriate for the situation and responsive to others' needs, values, and expectations. The main elements of this model are writer, subject, audience, and context. Every writer brings a frame of reference to the rhetorical situation that affects how and what they say about the subject. Their frame of reference is influenced by their experiences, values, and needs, race and ethnicity, gender and education, geography and institutional affiliations, to name a few. The audience includes the individuals the writer engages with the text. Most often there is an intended or target audience for a text. The subject then refers to the issue at hand, the major topics the writer, text, and audience address. And the context refers to other direct and indirect social, cultural, geographical, political, and institutional factors that likely influence the writer, text, and audience in a particular situation. In this model, we also have subordinate elements, namely exigence, purpose, and genre. Exigence answers the question why the writer is writing about the subject, or what has moved the writer to create a text. There must be a reason in writing a text. Next is purpose. It answers the question, what is the writer seeking from the audience? Or what does the writer want the audience to believe, know, feel, and do? Finally, we have genre. It answers the question, how is the subject presented to the audience? It involves the style of the writing considering the context, subject, and the audience. Here are the other definitions of socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing. Martin's sociocultural view of writing represents writing as a goal-directed social activity and is about using writing to get things done. John's 1999 added that this approach is based on the contention that texts are social. Important written and spoken discourses are situated within specific contexts and produced and read by individuals whose values reflect those of the communities to which they belong. Given all the definitions, we can conclude or we can say that goal setting and decision-making activities cannot be divorced from the social context in which a text is written and in which it will be read. The goal a writer sets must be shaped by and has to respond to the writer's and reader's social, cultural context. Now let's move to the different models or intervention programs in teaching writing, taking into account the socio-cognitive approach. Let's start with the integration of cognitive and social models of writing by Flower and Hayes, 1981. The basic principle of Flower and Hayes' cognitive process and social model of writing is that writing is a problem-solving, decision-making activity directed by a rhetorical goal. A rhetorical goal explains the purpose of your argument and proves your point to the audience about writing. It involves understanding your audience, the context, the tone, and the genre to be used. Rhetorical goals come after knowing the rhetorical situation or problem. In rhetorical problem, you are knowing the things that you want to write, considering the elements, namely writer, subject, audience, context, exigence, genre, and purpose. While in rhetorical goal, you are formulating steps in writing, considering what you have prepared in your rhetorical problem, so it's more on the process. This is the model of Flower and Hayes. As we can notice, the cognitive and social constructivist models of writing were integrated to provide the foundation for teaching socially situated thinking as a first step to improve writing. The classroom activity is, given an essay prompt, the students are going to construct its social context and write a goal statement to show response to the situation. It involves knowing the rhetorical problem and setting the rhetorical goal. Exercises to practice goal setting or goal-directed thinking require students to first create the social context by describing possible preceding events that made the writing necessary, the identity, expectations and attitude of the reader, the writer's persona, and relationship with the reader. Here is an example of a writing task. The teacher gave an essay topic to the students. Should wearing the school uniform be made voluntary and not compulsory? And groups of students were given a list of items and instructed to select items that could be used to support a given position statement. We have two items or positions. In position A, wearing the school uniform should be compulsory because it creates a sense of identity and is convenient. And in position B, wearing the school uniform should be voluntary because it stifles creativity and can be inconvenient. Then groups were asked to justify their group's decision with reference to the rhetorical goal reflected in the position statement. How is it an example of activity under socio-cognitive approach? This activity trains students in the cognitive dimension of the writing process, like knowing the rhetorical problem and setting the rhetorical goal. Also, it involves social view of writing, knowing that the teacher drew the student's attention to the writer's whole text intention with respect to the reader and social context that would influence choice of meaning. In this activity, some students might choose position A to support their position statement, taking into account the rules in their school about proper wearing of uniform and also considering what's best for them as students. In here, teacher talk would guide students' choice of meaning with reference to the target reader's potential response, writer role, social function of the text, and so on. The pedagogical objective is always to develop systematic thinking processes that include awareness of the social-cultural dimension of a writing task. That's it for the integration of cognitive and social models of writing by Flower and Hayes. Now let's move to Socio-Cognitive Writing Intervention Program by Harris and Graham, 1992. In this program, the integration of social and cognitive theory was achieved through the explicit teaching of the cognitive writing process, modeling of the thinking process, and the genre-based approach to consider audience and purpose of writing. Here, the students are instructed to follow the process writing stages of planning, organizing, writing, and revising. The first stage is planning. It is setting the purpose and audience of the target text. In this process, teachers should first demonstrate how to set a goal and select an audience given a topic. Second is organizing, generating ideas based on the procedures of narrative using W, what to, and how to questions. The mnemonic chart of W, what to, and how to questions from Harris and Graham aims to help participants develop thinking processes for narrative writing. We have the plot structure of narrative writing, which starts with the orientation followed by events, complication, resolution, and of course, the ending. In the orientation part, the triple W questions are used to basically identify the characters and the setting. The two what questions are distributed to events and complication part. For the events, what does the main character do? Basically giving more background about the character. For the complication, what is the problem that the main character faces? It involves knowing the conflict or the challenges that the character will face. Lastly, the two how questions. One is in the resolution and one is in the ending. How is the problem or conflict solved? And how does the story end? The interesting part in this model or program is that the teacher can ask a why question in each stage. Formulating why question is the most important feature because it drives students to think for the reason for including a particular detail in their composition. It helps in aligning the written document with their goal of writing. Let's move to the last stages. We have writing and revising. After planning and organizing, the students are asked to write a story. Consistent recall of rhetorical goal and audience is performed through why questions and self-assessment. Self-assessments will be performed at the end with students being allowed to modify their narrative. They are given enough time to finish their narrative composition based on the revised plan. There you have it, the Socio-Cognitive Writing Intervention Program by Harris and Graham 1992. Finally, we have the model of instructional scaffolding for the Socio-Cognitive Approach to Writing by Walke. In this model, there are 6 stages, namely modeling, bridging, contextualizing, schema building, representing text, and developing metacognition. The sample activity in this model is that students are tasked to write or construct a story map parallel to the story that the language teacher will share to them. The first stage is modeling. The teacher gives students clear examples of what is requested of them to imitate in completing the writing task. The teacher then models appropriate language use for the performance of specific academic functions. Here are the examples of modeling. The first one is stating provision of examples. The teacher told the students that a sample story will be shown in their class. The next example is providing a sample story. The teacher shared her sample narrative to the class. Here is the sample narrative. The title is The Frog Prince. The characters, we have the beautiful princess and the handsome prince who is under an evil spell and became a frog. The event, princess was on her way to a party. The problem, she dropped her diamond necklace into a pond. She did not know how to get it back. And the solution, the frog will help her get back her necklace but under one condition. Allow the frog to sit on her head for 1 hour. And the ending, the frog turned into a handsome prince, and they lived happily ever after. In this stage, it is important to provide a model text type and analyze the text in terms of text structure and its linguistic features. Language teachers also need to teach students construct their own sentences as preparation for writing their own stories. The second stage is bridging. It is helping students to activate prior knowledge or establish a personal link between them and the subject matter, such as asking students to share personal experiences related to the theme. Here are the examples of bridging. On the first example, the teacher had a quick recapitulation of what they did on the previous lesson, including the story map and the parallel story. Another example is review of the previous lesson prior to the activity given by the teacher. Bridging approaches help learners learn the concept of planning and writing mainly by activating students' prior knowledge. Language teachers must link new contexts and understandings to what the students already knew about writing through a recap of what was taught in the previous lesson. The third stage is contextualizing. It is making academic language accessible and engaging for students through using authentic objects, sources of information, realia or analogies based on students' experiences. This is the first example of contextualizing. The teacher grabbed an eraser and dropped it to show the main idea of the story. In this example, the teacher involved the characters to know what actually happened in the story. The teacher guided the students to understand the concept of main idea by using analogies and acting out to prompt students during group conferencing. The main idea of the sample narrative is when the princess dropped her diamond necklace into the pond and she didn't know how to get it back. The frog promised to help her with a condition. Aside from acting out using eraser and highlighters, the teacher can also use a diamond necklace, a princess doll, and a toy frog to show the context. Fourth is schema building. It is activating students' schema and weaving new information into pre-existing structures of meaning to enable them to accept new connections and to organize knowledge and understanding, giving general knowledge or the broad picture before studying the details. In this example of schema building, the teacher had a recap on the previous activities they did before coming up with a story map. This includes the teacher reviewing the main idea of the sample narrative. This helps the students to think about their pre-existing understanding of how to write so as to enable new applications, such as coming up with their own story maps later on. Thus, schema activation is done to build knowledge about the narrative genre to enable application in writing. The fifth stage is representing text. It is asking the students to transform the linguistic constructions of the narrative and modify some information. In the first example, the teacher tasked the students to construct a simple parallel story by applying the acronym STAR with emphasis on S for substitute. In example number 2, the teacher prompted the students to change some details and information in the sample narrative. In representing texts, it's a must for language teachers to let students modify some information in the original story. This is their preparation in constructing their story maps. And for the last stage, we have developing metacognition. It is helping students manage their thinking in terms of strategy application, strategy choice, monitoring, evaluating, and adjusting performances during activity, and planning for future writing based on evaluation of performances. In this stage, students are expected to write a parallel story considering what they have learned from their teacher. In the metacognition example 1, the teacher instructed the students to construct a story map in a group conference. It is also called a joint construction. She also pointed out the story elements that are important in writing a story. In examples 2 and 3, The teacher helped the students to think about the important parts of the story as their basis in writing their own story maps. The development of students' metacognitive knowledge occurred during the students' group discussion to plan a group narrative. It touched their declarative knowledge when they were reminded to focus on task goals and steps for writing. It also touched their procedural knowledge when they were prompted to think strategies to be implemented in composing. And of course, it challenged their conditional knowledge when they were asked when and why to use strategies during the writing process. That's it for the model of instructional scaffolding for the socio-cognitive approach to writing by Walke. Socio-cognitive approach in teaching writing is a fusion of two significant views of writing, the cognitive and social. It is a concept that involves the thinking process and goal setting, considering the social context, the cultural norm, and practices of the writing community. It has a lot to contribute to the language teachers, especially to the learners who need this approach in learning how to write meaningfully. This discussion showcased 3 models or intervention programs with examples of activities from different researchers and professionals that can be added to the teachers' activity banks to enhance the way of teaching writing to the students. Also, in implementing these models, the teachers can help the students reach a higher state of independence in writing a narrative, which is a goal of this approach. Now is your time to share your teaching writing experiences incorporating socio-cognitive approach. Let me know in the comments. Again, this is Jerome Vincent E. Ejercito. Thank you for watching.